Have you ever wondered why, without saying a single word, your mere presence can destabilize, attract, or even intimidate a man? It's not your looks, your character, or even your personality. It's your sexual energy. Carl Jung stated that sexual energy is one of the most powerful and unconscious forces that drive human beings, as it connects directly to the deepest archetypes of the psyche. What few people understand is that this energy, when expressed from the feminine, not only arouses desire, it touches the male ego, transforms it, challenges it, and confronts it. Today we'll take a deep dive to understand how feminine sexual energy, beyond the physical, activates unconscious mechanisms in a man that even he cannot explain. When a woman is aware of her own energy, not using it as manipulation but as an authentic expression of her being, she inevitably becomes a mirror in which the man is faced with his own masculinity, his insecurities, and his deepest longing for wholeness. But here's the key. It's not about provoking, but about understanding. It's not about seduction, but about being. Because when a woman fully embodies her vital energy, her magnetism becomes a force that transcends the physical and penetrates the male unconscious, right where his ego is built and defended. Before revealing how this energy moves a man's ego in ways you never imagined, I invite you to stay until the end. I promise what you'll discover will not only change how you perceive your relationships, but also help you understand yourself with a depth you may never have explored. And while you listen, I propose something. Reflect on how you've felt your own energy in your relationships. Have you suppressed it, repressed it, or expressed it freely? If any of these questions resonate with you, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might inspire other women who are also seeking to understand this invisible power we all carry within. Let's begin with the first level of this impact, how feminine sexual energy directly fuels or challenges male pride, and why this marks the beginning of any lasting emotional bond. When a woman connects with her authentic sexual energy, something very subtle yet powerful happens inside a man. His pride is awakened, but also put to the test. Carl Jung explained that the male ego is like a structure constantly seeking validation and meaning in the external world. It's a defense mechanism, but also a way of constructing identity. And when it encounters a woman who radiates confidence in her femininity and desire, the male ego cannot remain unaffected. This is where many confuse sexual energy with provocation or manipulation, but it's not the same. True feminine sexual energy doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't seduce crudely. It simply is. It shows itself in how you speak, how you move, in the quiet confidence you transmit as you take your place in the world without apology. And that presence touches a deep nerve in the man, the feeling of being enough or not. When he senses this energy, his ego can interpret it in two ways: as a challenge that motivates him to grow, to become worthy of that woman who stands whole and complete in herself, or as a threat that causes him to pull away, to avoid or even reject because he fears not being enough. Jung maintained that every man projects not only his desire onto a woman, but also his unconscious fears and longings. And feminine sexual energy is the trigger for those projections. That's why, when you express yourself from that genuine place, you might notice that some men feel irresistibly drawn to you, while others pull away without really knowing why. It's not a coincidence. It's the unconscious manifestation of their own internal struggles with their ego and masculine identity. And here lies the paradox. The more authentic your expression, the stronger the effect it has on the male ego. Not because you're trying to dominate it, but because, without intending to, you awaken in him the need to define himself, to assert himself, to prove that he can be the man who deserves a woman like you. So the question isn't, how can I make him want me? But rather, how can I fully inhabit my energy so that he is confronted with himself? Because in that confrontation is where real, deep attraction is born. Not the superficial kind that fades with time. And as you keep listening, I want you to reflect. Have you ever noticed how your mere presence caused a shift in a man's behavior, how your authenticity made him either come closer or run away. I'd love to read about that in the comments afterward. Your story might resonate with other women who are also exploring their power. When feminine sexual energy is expressed authentically, it doesn't just touch a man's pride, it also activates an ancient instinct, the drive to conquer. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes as universal patterns that exist within the collective unconscious, and one of the most deeply rooted archetypes in men is that of the hunter, the conqueror. This archetype is not only about the physical, it is tied to the need for effort, achievement, and overcoming challenges. When a woman presents herself as whole and complete, aware of her energy but without the need to give herself away immediately, a man feels deep within his psyche that he must win her over, not to possess her but to feel worthy of her closeness. This is where the idea of playing hard to get is often confused with the authentic expression of boundaries and self-worth. It's not about playing games, it's a natural manifestation of self-awareness. You choose how and when to share your energy. The male ego, when confronted with this attitude, activates automatically. If he senses that your energy is easily accessible without effort, his interest might fade, not because he doesn't like you, but because his inner conqueror archetype isn't stimulated. But if he perceives your presence as a gift given from conscious choice, not from need, then attraction becomes inevitable and deeply meaningful. Jung asserted that the human psyche grows and evolves through the tension of opposites. In this case, the tension between your presence and your availability creates an internal space for growth within the man, a need to go beyond himself, to prove, to strive for what he values. And when he achieves it, the bond that forms is much stronger and more emotionally intense because it was built through an inner conquest, not mere instant gratification. That's why it's so important as a woman to understand that your sexual energy is not a tool to gain validation, but a vital resource that, when expressed with authenticity and self-respect, triggers a profound internal movement in a man, one that transforms him, helps him grow, and connects him with his own masculine strength. And while you reflect on this, I ask you, have you ever allowed yourself to be pursued from a place of self-worth, letting a man show his intention and commitment before giving yourself emotionally? If so, I'd love for you to share what that experience was like. Maybe other women can find inspiration in your story. When a woman expresses herself from her authentic sexual energy and allows a man to approach from the place of desire and not from inertia, a very particular psychological phenomenon occurs. The man begins to project his ideal self onto her. Carl Jung called this the ideal self, the unconscious image of what a person aspires to become. For men, this ideal is often associated with strength, the ability to protect, to conquer, and to leave a meaningful legacy. When a woman radiates confidence, authenticity, and a sexuality that is calm yet powerful, she becomes the mirror in which the man begins to see himself as the person he dreams of becoming. It's no longer just about attraction, it becomes identification. He doesn't only desire the woman in front of him, he begins to desire becoming the man he believes she deserves. And this movement is profoundly transformative for his ego. Jung explained that the ego is often built upon external expectations, but rarely aligned with the deepest aspirations of the soul. However, when a man connects with a woman who awakens his vital energy, his ego is challenged and compelled to evolve. Not because she demands it, but because her very presence and authenticity ignite in him the urge to grow, to step closer to that once distant ideal. This is where many women underestimate the power of their energy. They think they have to do more, give more, offer more to keep a man's interest, when in truth, simply staying true to themselves and holding their presence with confidence is enough to trigger, in a man, that unconscious process of growth and transformation. That's why, when a woman connects with her sexual energy and relates from a place of wholeness, she doesn't just evoke desire, she inspires transformation. The man begins to associate his process of self-discovery with the relationship, and that's when the bond becomes almost unbreakable, because it's not based on superficial attraction, but on a connection that touches the deepest fibers of his identity. I invite you to reflect on this. Have you ever felt that a man, by being with you, began to change, to improve, to aspire to things he previously didn't allow himself to. What do you think you awakened in him to make that happen? If you'd like, I'd love for you to share it in the comments. Your experience could be valuable for many women who haven't yet realized the transformative power within their energy. When a woman consciously embodies her sexual energy, she also awakens in a man one of the deepest conflicts of his ego, the tension between the desire to surrender and the fear of losing control. Carl Jung said that the greatest psychic shifts occur when we come into contact with something that threatens our identity as we know it. And for a man, connecting with a woman who radiates that vital energy can be just as fascinating as it is unsettling. This is a crucial point. Feminine sexual energy, when expressed authentically and not from a place of lack, confronts a man with his own vulnerability. It forces him to face the possibility of opening up, of feeling, of surrendering to a force beyond his rational control. And for a male ego that has often been built on the idea of dominance, strength, and self-sufficiency, this experience can be disorienting. Here arises the most beautiful and complex paradox of the relationship. The woman who knows how to inhabit her sexual energy without manipulating or dominating becomes a safe space for the man to gradually lower his defenses, without pressure, without demands, just by being. And that space is ultimately what allows the male ego to soften and begin to transform. Jung explained that the process of individuation, the journey toward integrating all parts of oneself, necessarily involves confronting what we repress or fear. For many men, this confrontation occurs in intimate connection with a woman who implicitly invites them to let go of a rigid image of themselves. And although this may cause resistance at first, if the woman remains firm in her authenticity, without giving in to the need to please or to seek validation, the man will feel increasingly drawn, not only to her but to the version of himself that begins to emerge through that connection. That's why the real question is, are you willing to stand firm in your authenticity, even when it challenges a man's ego? Because in that firmness lies your true power. It's not about adapting to his fears, but about being the mirror that invites him to overcome them. And while you reflect on this, I'd love to know, have you ever felt that your authenticity triggered a crisis in a man? How did you experience that moment? If you'd like, you can share your experience in the comments. It might inspire other women going through something similar. When a woman holds her authenticity firm, without bending to a man's insecurities, it activates an essential and instinctive impulse in him: the desire to protect. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes as universal structures that shape human behavior. And in men, one of the most powerful is the archetype of the protector or the hero. This impulse doesn't arise from an external need, but from an inner motivation, the desire to feel useful, needed, and valuable. Here a fascinating phenomenon occurs. Feminine sexual energy, when expressed with integrity and self-respect, is not presented as a lack or a demand, but as an invitation. And it is precisely in that implicit invitation that a man finds the opportunity to offer his strength, to express his capacity, to protect, to care, to support, not because she needs him to survive, but because he recognizes that his presence can be a meaningful contribution to her life. When a woman allows a man to step into that role without giving up her independence or personal power, a profoundly healthy dynamic emerges. He doesn't feel obligated to protect her out of pity or duty, but does so from the desire to be part of her world, to add, to actively participate in the vital space she inhabits with such authenticity. This protector role directly nourishes the male ego, but in a way that transcends superficial validation. It's not about inflating his vanity with empty compliments, but about allowing him to experience that his presence has a positive impact, that his strength finds purpose when placed in service of a genuine connection. That's why small gestures, like letting him open a door, asking his opinion on something important, or simply acknowledging his support in key moments, activate that protector archetype within him in a natural and powerful way. Not as a manipulative strategy, but as a conscious way of integrating his masculine energy into a balanced relationship. Jung believed that the integration of opposites is essential for psychological growth, and in this case, the integration between feminine sexual energy and the masculine need to protect creates a perfect dance where both find space to grow and evolve. And let me ask you, have you ever allowed yourself to be cared for without feeling that it made you any less strong? What was that experience like? If you feel like sharing, I'd love to read your story in the comments. It might help other women reconcile with the idea that receiving protection is not weakness, but openness. When this protective dynamic is consciously and harmoniously established, something even deeper happens. The woman becomes an emotional refuge for the man, a space where he can finally let his guard down. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as the part of ourselves we repress because it doesn't align with the image we want to project. For many men, that shadow is filled with fears, vulnerabilities, and emotions they learned early on to hide in order to meet society's expectations of unshakable strength. But when a man connects with a woman who, from her authentic sexual energy, radiates acceptance and safety, he feels, perhaps for the first time in his life, free to reveal those parts he has always kept hidden. Not because she demands it, but because her mere presence, without judgment, without pressure, creates the perfect environment for his ego to soften and his full humanity to emerge with both its light and shadow. This process doesn't happen instantly. The male ego, accustomed to holding on to masks of strength and control, needs time and experiences that prove it's safe to lower those defenses. This is where the woman plays a vital role, not as a savior or therapist, but as a human being who holds space with empathy, with calm presence, and with the deep belief that the other can be fully authentic without fear of rejection. Jung stated that true transformation is only possible when we dare to integrate our shadow. And for men, that journey often accelerates when they find in a woman a loving mirror, someone who doesn't judge them, but instead invites them to show themselves fully, even in their most vulnerable moments. That's why the woman who inhabits her sexual energy consciously not only awakens desire in a man, but becomes the space where he can heal, rebuild parts of himself, and most of all, rest. Because in a world that constantly demands him to prove, to perform, to conquer, the chance to simply be in the presence of an authentic woman becomes an invaluable gift. So let me ask you, have you realized the power you hold when you simply choose to be present, without trying to change the other, without demanding, without expecting him to be someone else? How have your relationships shifted when you embraced that attitude? If you'd like, share your experience in the comments. It could deeply support other women still learning to trust in their power to be a refuge. When a man experiences the safety of being fully himself alongside a woman who radiates her sexual energy with calm and consciousness, something profound begins to change in his psyche. He starts to redefine what love and connection mean to him. Carl Jung believed that the journey of individuation, the path toward integrating all aspects of the self, is only possible when we come into contact with what was once repressed or denied. And in this case, love stops being a transaction based on expectations or traditional roles. It becomes a space for mutual transformation. Feminine sexual energy, when embodied fully and authentically, becomes a catalyst for this transformation. It's no longer just the fuel for physical attraction. It becomes the door through which a man can reconcile with his own vulnerability, his deepest desires, and his most hidden fears. In this sacred space, the male ego begins to soften, to let go of the rigid defenses that once kept him distant and inaccessible. Here lies one of the greatest paradoxes. The stronger and more conscious a woman is of her own energy, the more capable a man becomes of surrendering emotionally to her, of opening himself to a relationship in which he doesn't need to prove anything, only to be, to exist, to share. And that kind of bond is the one that truly endures, because it is not sustained by power games or unresolved needs, but by freedom and mutual acceptance. Jung explained that authentic love is not the kind that demands or expects the other to mold themselves to our desires, but the kind that allows and celebrates the other as they are, with both virtues and imperfections. And when a woman holds this energy without falling into the need to please or control the relationship, the man perceives her as a safe space, a presence that walks beside him on his own journey of self-discovery. That's why, when you ask yourself how to maintain a solid and meaningful relationship, the answer isn't in doing more or giving more. It lies in being more of yourself, in fully inhabiting your body, your desire, your intuition, and your capacity to hold space without losing your center. That balance is what evokes deep respect in a man, genuine admiration, and above all, an emotional connection that transcends time and circumstance. I invite you to reflect on this. How have your relationships transformed when you chose to be yourself? Without pretending or trying to please, what changed in the way men perceived you? If you feel comfortable, share your reflection in the comments. Your experience could be a guiding light for other women still reconnecting with their own essence. When a woman fully understands and inhabits her sexual energy, she becomes an unforgettable presence in a man's life. Not because of what she does or gives, but because of what she represents. A mirror of authenticity, a constant invitation to evolve, and above all, a space of emotional freedom. Carl Jung taught that human beings become what they believe they can be. And often that belief is born from the reflection they find in their most meaningful relationships. So, when a man engages with a woman who respects and values herself, who radiates confidence in her own skin, he cannot help but see himself through her eyes. And in that reflection, he discovers parts of himself he never even knew existed. The love that arises from this connection is not rooted in dependency or anxious attachment, but in expansion, in mutual growth. Your feminine sexual energy is, at its core, your vitality, your creative impulse, your ability to enjoy life through pleasure and presence. It is not a tool to attract or retain. It is a natural expression of your being. When you recognize it and express it from a place of authenticity and self-respect, you not only impact the men who cross your path, but you impact yourself, because you reconcile with a fundamental part of your identity. That's why today, I want to invite you to stop asking how to make a man stay, and instead ask how you can fully inhabit your own energy, because paradoxically, when you stop trying to make someone stay, that's when they most want to stay, not because you need them to complete you, but because you choose them from abundance, from freedom. And if this content resonated with you, if at any moment during this video you felt something stir within, I would love for you to share it in the comments. You don't need to write something long or elaborate, just a word, a sentence, or an emotion that arose while listening. Your testimony may be the spark that another woman needs to begin reconnecting with her own energy. If you feel this content brought you value, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and to share this video with a friend or woman who you believe could benefit from this reflection. Your support is what allows me to continue creating deep and authentic content, rooted in real psychology and the transformative power of knowing oneself. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me this far. It's been a true honor to share these reflections with you. See you in the next video. And remember, your energy is your greatest power.